Just recently, a friend of mine went through a bit of a rough patch. It was with a girl he met from online dating. It was a mashup of deceit, suspicion, sadness, mental illness, and disappointment. His story reminded me of Firewatch, which on its surface doesn't seem to be a game that would encompass any of these elements, but it is an emotionally charged game despite its very innocent looking appearance. Now, Firewatch visually and artistically is minimalist. It's actually similar to posters created in the 1930s. But then again, so is the forest as a whole. There's not much in it, and you're supposed to be alone monitoring a national park, so what can you expect? The game is about voluntary isolation, as you, the main character, is making an attempt to get away from the difficulties that life brings, in his case, his wife with dementia that's been weighing on him for quite some time. But it does something very different and unique, and that's connecting you to the main character, who's named Harry, and just as a quick aside, is actually voiced by Rich Sommer, who you might remember from Mad Men as Harry Crane, or the guy who wanted Pam to study her art outside of Scranton in The Office. Anyways, you are this character, despite not having the same problems, perhaps. For example, the wife with dementia. Maybe you don't have that, but we all have different problems. We all face different hardships, and sometimes we try to escape, or we do escape away for a while instead of facing them. Straight away, let me tell you that this is not a game in the traditional sense of action and adventure. You're not Indiana Jones here. It's more about the story and making you feel connected to something that you can relate to. A lot of the background is vague, and the interactions are primarily through the amazing voice acting that feels natural through the radio and almost gets you involved in a conversation. Sometimes you might find yourself murmuring the responses yourself as you play the game, as if they can actually hear you. As the protagonist, you develop a relationship with your supervisor over the radio with various responses to things you see or notice. You develop a relationship through this means, and for all of us that are still or have lived in this isolation, and I'm not even talking about what's been going on recently, this can feel familiar. Delilah, who is voiced by Cissy Jones, who you might know from Life is Strange as Joyce Price, that's a game I cannot wait to talk about. Basically, she's very empathetic, she's a great listener, and responds to you well. It feels right chatting with her in game, not forced. She also serves as almost a second conscious as things turn a bit weird quickly. After some teens go missing and you start noticing sabotage taking place, coupled with the suspicious findings of governmental property, you start to become suspicious, not just as the character, but as the player. You suspect everyone you have come across, and you wonder if you're being used or deceived. I've never felt like this before, and that's basically that I didn't know what was really happening. I was trying to put together the clues that I had available, which at this point is not a lot. But I want you to play this game because it's a great story. And remember, you are playing it for its story. It's rooted in reality, so don't expect zombies to come from their graves and stalk you or ghosts to haunt you. It's probably the most interesting and yet realistic game with a plot that I've ever played. I felt invested in it, and more importantly, I felt what the character felt the entire time. It wasn't like playing the usual game archetypes of strong brooding types or jaded cynics. It was just an ordinary guy trying to do a job and chatting with somebody who he connected with. The mystery itself was a cherry on top of me trying to figure out what's going on and wondering what I got myself into. So what does this have to do with my friend? Well, the game is strongly about this relationship and its ups and downs in a short amount of time. A lot of thinking and dwelling on things that could have been done or can be done. It's a game that is very human. When you reach the end of the game, it's one of the few that require you to look up past discussions and videos regarding the conspiracies because there are so many angles to it and you need other people's perspectives. To this day, I wonder a lot about what went on there and the subtle little things that made me suspicious, just like scenarios in our own reality. It's currently available on PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, and PC. It's a great game, albeit a bit short at only about 4 to 5 hours. Pick it up on sale. I think it's regular $20 US on Steam, but enjoy the story and really get into it. Treat yourself to some clinical depression. On another interesting note, a new game by the same makers called In the Valley of Gods, set in 1920s Egypt, has been set to be sort of released or sort of not. I don't have a lot of info other than it's basically about you being in 1920s Egypt, and I think you're trying to rekindle a relationship with your sister or something like that. Again, it's still in the making, and it's been delayed by some random happenings here and there. It's still on Steam, so it looks like it's been put on hold rather than canceled. Another little note on that too is Steam bought Campo Santo, the developers. So I think if it's still on the Steam store, they have plans for it. So that's more on a positive note there. But the only reason I could find that it was being delayed was because of Half-Life being worked on and Dota Underlords or something like that. It's a weird, confusing mess of what's been happening. They took it off Twitter, then they put it on their Twitter profile, or, just a lot of kind of mixed messages. But overall, from Firewatch and then moving on to, let's say, this 1920 Egypt style thing, and working with somebody, or at least having another character with you and not just being alone, I think it's going to be an interesting prospect to really get into, and I'm kind of excited to see what happens when it comes out, or if it comes out. I'm fingers crossed. I'm fairly certain it's going to come out. It looks like they put in some work, and I just don't see them abandoning such a great story-driven narrative like Firewatch had. But overall, again, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens, and if you get a chance to just put that on your watch list, again, that is In the Valley of Gods, and let's just see what happens when that comes out. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and again, check out Firewatch if you get the chance to. Great game, great story, and amazing voice acting.